Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. And now, Tider Insider TV.
The guy that wins the quarterback job is going to be the guy that wins the team over with his ability to play on a consistent basis, make the kind of choices and decisions, show the kind of leadership to affect other people.
Winning the team. That's been what Nick Saban's mantra has been in regards to quarterback at Alabama for the last couple of years. Good evening, everyone, and welcome into Tider Insider TV alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com. I'm Gary Harris. Our program presented every week by Buffalo Rock Bottling Company, and tonight we've got Diet Pepsi Wild Cherry that we'll enjoy during the program. Why don't you enjoy some great Pepsi products the next time you're at your local grocery store? Pick them up, take them home, and pop the top like Rodney and I while you're watching TITV. Well, Rodney, that's the question. Whether or not Nick Saban gets tired of being asked about it really doesn't matter. He's going to get asked about it by reporters, and fans are going to continue to converse about it throughout the summer. That's who will be under center when Alabama opens the season this coming September at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas against Southern Cal. It's a question that probably won't get answered until right before that ball game, if even then. And Nick Saban will continue to be asked about it, as we talked about throughout this spring practice session and into the fall practice session. I know we're just 5 practices in, Rod, but you've been to every practice for the viewing period. How do you see these quarterbacks shaping up in practice? Is Cooper Bateman the favorite since he's the most experienced, or is it one of these other young guys you expect to make the move?
Well, I think it's where it's been. I don't think anything's really changed. I think it's so early right now. But I do think because of Cooper Bateman's experience last year. Let's face it, he went through 15 weeks as being the backup quarterback. Actually, one of those weeks he was a starter against Ole Miss. But all of those reps that he got, all of those opportunities in terms of preparation, all of that experience he got week to week, that certainly gives him an advantage because those other guys don't have that experience that he got last year. And I think it also served to build a little bit of confidence in him. So, I mean, if you had to say maybe somebody would be have the early edge, certainly you would have to say Cooper Bateman with that experience. Now, with that said, Nick Saban just spelled it out right there. It's going to be the guy who does all the right things, wins the team over like Jake Coker did last year.
Well, you know, some might make this a negative, having a quarterback battle where you don't really have a lot of experience, but we've been in a similar situation with Alabama the last 2 years, and it's worked out. And I would say this, Rod, and there have been some great quarterbacks that have come through here, highly recruited quarterbacks. You could argue that right now, those 4 scholarship quarterbacks are as highly touted and highly recruited out of high school as any combination of quarterbacks on the roster at the same time in Alabama football history. You could make that argument based on being recruited out of high school.
Yeah, well, you remember back in the 80s, they had Newberry, Sutton, Billy Ray, Jeff Dunn, all of those guys. Yeah. So certainly those guys, as you talked about, are right up there with that group in terms of how highly regarded they were coming out of high school. And I do think these guys are really talented, and you mentioned the inexperience, but again, I think there's a lot to work with, and I think that feel pretty confident that Lane Kiffin will once again develop a guy who can be a winner.
Yeah, I do too. I think they got some good players out there. It's going to be fun to watch, and I think you should just sit back and enjoy it. Of course, A-Day will be a time where we get to see them all in game action, and that's going to be a good time as well. Well, there are battles elsewhere on the football team, including the offensive line, where there is a opening at right tackle and at center. But Nick Saban, who's been pretty laid back this spring, got a little bit, he got a little bit irked, like Nick Saban has been known to do, when he was asked about holes in the offensive line yesterday by a reporter, and he didn't necessarily agree with that assessment.
How can you judge the offensive line, especially when you got so many open spots potentially, against a defensive line that's really the most experience you have on the team?
Well, I don't think our defensive line is all that experienced. We only got 3 guys that have any experience out there. Jonathan Allen's not playing. We moved Dakota Ball back to defense. He's not playing. So, you know, Dalvin's got experience, and Deron has experience. Who else has experience? We got more experience on the offensive line. All right, so I don't know how you guys come up with this. We lost 2 guys on the offensive line, right? We lost 4 guys on the defensive line. So, I mean, my West Virginia math, as bad as it might be, it still don't add up to what you're coming up with here.
So even though he's been a kinder and gentler Saban for the most part here recently, he can still, although I think he was having a little fun there. But he makes a good point. I mean, the offensive line's got a couple of spots, but that defensive line, when you lose the likes of Ashawn Robinson, Jaron Reed, Denzel Duvall, Darren Lake, so they're replacing guys on both sides of the lines of scrimmage, which is what's going to happen in a good program. Good news is, like at quarterback, there's some talented guys waiting to step up and take their turn.
On both sides of the line of scrimmage, really. You know, Cam Robinson's not doing much this spring, going through some individual stuff, and Jonathan Allen the same way on the defensive side. But, Gary, a lot of ability on both sides of the ball, a lot of talent on the offensive line. I think, you know, they're going to have an opportunity. They're doing it right now in terms of evaluating all of those guys to try to find the best five, and they've got a lot to choose from. And
real quickly, your thoughts on Saban. I said on my radio show this morning on Tide 99.1 FM that he can still get a little bit worked up at times, but all in all, I mean, he is so comfortable now. This is the longest he's ever been at one place. You sense it even when he tries to come across as being a little testy. There's almost a smirk there, almost a smile. I mean, you know, I just continue to say that this is it for him. He knows it. He's going to finish out at the University of Alabama, and his goal now is to win as many more championships and games here as he can. He's not thinking about the next move, the next job, the next place he's going anymore.
Well, and I also think, too, Gary, when, you know, you're coming off a national championship and you look at the players that they've recruited, they have a lot of young talent here, and I think that, you know, again, you have to make it happen. You have to do everything it takes to make it happen. But they have the players. They have a lot of great athletes. You look at the defensive side of the ball. People have talked about how you've lost Ashawn Robinson and Jaron Reed and DJ Petway. But they've got we haven't really even talked about Deshaun Hand. And Coach Saban didn't mention him there, but later he did in the press conference yesterday and talked about how the tremendous progress he had made up front. So you look at that defensive line, for example, Deshaun Hand, Deron Payne, who I think is, you know, he's going to be an outstanding player. Jonathan Allen, when he gets back. Dalvin Tomlinson's now up over 300 pounds, and he might have been the most consistent defensive lineman for a good part of last year. So, you know, there's a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, and I think when you look at that, they've got a chance to be really good again next year.
Excellent. Well, still to come on Tider Insider Television, the Alabama baseball team has some big wins and some frustrating losses in the early going. We'll discuss the state of the program heading into its third SEC weekend. Plus, a former high school All-American kicker is joining the Tide. Does that mean anything for Adam Griffith? Well, maybe, maybe not. We'll have that discussion for you as well on the show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide. And also, we'll be getting to your phone calls, emails, and tweets. There's the information on how you can get in touch with us, including the phone number 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. So go ahead and get those calls in now, because we'll be right back with the award-winning Tider Insider TV right after this. Stay with us.
We've improved. You know, when you look at our strikeout numbers over the last 7 or 8 games, it has certainly went down. And you know, as I said Saturday, looking at our SEC stats is more in line with what you would like to see. I mean, we're hitting, you know, 300 in the SEC, and our numbers are pretty solid throughout.
And the Bama baseball team will take on Auburn in the annual Capital City Classic. That's coming up at the top of the hour down at Riverwalk Stadium in Montgomery. Alabama has been good so far in the SEC, 4-2, and easily could be 6-0. They lost a couple of games late against LSU and Tennessee, but midweek games kind of let them down. A couple weeks ago at Southern Miss, they got taken down 9-2. Then last week over in Birmingham, lost to UAB 8-0. So it's been a team, Rodney, that has showed flashes of being really good, but it's still shown some of those old habits too, where they can have some performances where they look quite frankly, poor. But tonight's a big game. I know it doesn't count in the SEC standings, but come regional time and super regional time, these midweek games are going to be big, particularly one against a team like Auburn, who is 1-5 in the SEC, 11-13 overall. Bama is just 1-6 against Auburn in these Capital City Classics, but they need to get this one tonight.
Well, you know, going back to those two series, Gary, they won the first 2 games in both, right? And then they dropped the third. But the pitching has certainly been there, and we talked about the hitting.
Coming around a little bit.
We talked about it earlier.
Coming around a little bit.
Before they started SEC play, and now that's, like you said, starting to come around. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of build upon these last 2 series.
At Georgia this weekend as they get back into the SEC, and but this game tonight's a big game. Again, it does not count in the SEC standings, but it counts on your record, and just the fact that they're 1-6 against Auburn in these Capital City Classics. They're going to throw John Keller tonight, so I think they're going to use their weekend lineup. Of course, Keith Holcomb not expected to be with them because of football duties, but I think you're going to see Alabama play well tonight. We'll have highlights from that game for you tonight on WVUA 23 News at 10. Well, Rodney, let's get back to football. Some news today. Alabama's going to add another graduate transfer, and he comes from an SEC rival. In fact, the team that's beat Alabama the last 2 years in a row. Andy Papanastos is joining the Crimson Tide from Ole Miss. Papanastos is a former Coles All-American high school kicker at Trinity Presbyterian in Montgomery. His family's got Alabama ties. He thought about coming to Alabama out of high school but didn't get offered a scholarship. He has played a limited role with the Rebels, but he's hoping to have a bigger role in the future with the Crimson Tide. Now, the neat thing about this guy is he's graduating this spring, but he's got 2 years of eligibility. So he can come here. He says he's good friends with Adam Griffith. He could back up Griffith this year, maybe get a chance to kick a little bit, and then have a chance to compete for the job in 2017.
Yeah, you always need a guy you can rely upon, whether, in terms of the backup guy, and because you never really know what could happen to your first string. Adam Griffith struggled a couple of years ago with some injuries. Gunnar Rayburn had to step in. So, again, I think it's always valuable to have a guy like this that has a little bit of experience. It certainly has a good leg. I think, Gary, you might have already checked this. Didn't he set the Alabama high school record, most field goals?
Broke Philip Doyle's record. Yeah. So Papanastos is a good kicker. And, again, he won't be on scholarship, so it's a good opportunity to get some competition for Griffith this year. And then this could be your starting kicker in 2017. And we've seen it before. Even with kickers established like Griffith, there are times these guys, for whatever reason, mentally, physically, they can lose it. So it's always nice to have another good kicker or two on your team. Well, you know what I'm talking about. You're laughing, but you know what I'm saying. Sometimes I'm scratching my head. Sometimes it gets in their head. And we've seen it with Griffith in the past. Although last year he was really, really good.
Yeah, he really was. I mean, certainly he was extremely valuable.
And we're expecting him to have a big year this year. But Papanastos could be biting at the bit in case Griffith hits a slump. All right, still to come on Tider Insider TV, the Alabama gymnastics team is hosting 5 other squads in the Tuscaloosa NCAA Regional this coming Saturday. We'll hear from head coach Dana Duckworth about that big meet. And next, we'll be welcoming your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Again, the information's on the screen, 205-348-9882. Email us at TITV@WVUA23.com. Or Katarina and Brandon are both biting at the bit there on Twitter. So if you use the hashtag TITV, you can get a comment or a question in that way, and we'll get it on the air too. So we'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, Tider Insider TV. We'll be back right after this timeout. Alabama gymnastics came within an eyelash of winning its 3rd straight SEC championship 2 weeks ago in North Little Rock, Arkansas. But now the Crimson Tide putting that meet behind them, getting ready for NCAA regionals, and Bama is hosting. Tide put up its highest score of the season at SECs, and now head coach Dana Duckworth is looking for just a little more improvement.
The first thing you do is you look at your performances and look at where can I get better. And so we use a lot of video. We talk about different things in our coaching and just basically ask the ladies to try different things to basically refine what we're doing.
And that NCAA regional is this Saturday at 4 p.m. at Coleman Coliseum. I'll be on the call for the SEC Network Plus along with Ashley Miles and Hannah Chalker for that big meet. Alabama tries to get back to the NCAA championships again. All right, Rodney, let's head to the phone lines. First up, our buddy John over in Bessemer. John, what's up, man? What's shaking? John.
Yo.
Go for it, buddy.
Hey, Ronnie, what's going on, man?
You the man.
Hey, man, I heard we lost a player, flipped to Georgia. Can we get 2 more players for next year? Later.
All right, John will tell our producers one question, and then he'll always ask another one. I'm sure he's talking about Fromm, the quarterback who flipped from Alabama to Georgia, but he's from Central Georgia there. Not really a surprise group of Georgia fan. Martin Richt and company didn't make him a priority. As soon as Kirby Smart did, he switched his commitment, so no surprise. But Alabama's going to sign a quarterback in this class, Rod.
Well, and I think, you made a good point. You summed it up really well there. He's from Warner Robins, and I think when Kirby went over there, it opened an opportunity for that commitment to change. And they had a quarterback committed, Bailey Hockman, who's very interested in Alabama, by the way, has been. And he decommitted from Georgia, so he'll be looking around. So, definitely, I think, when you start talking about quarterbacks, they usually come off the market pretty early and stick with their commitments, but Fromm didn't.
All right, let's go to Vincent and talk with JB. JB, what's up, buddy?
Thanks, guys. Really enjoy your show.
Thank you.
Just want to give an attaboy to Richard Mullaney.
Sure.
I don't think he got enough credit for his play last year. If you go back and look at the games he played in, if he wasn't making a clutch catch, he was making a key block that sprung somebody on a big gain. And really glad he came to Alabama and wish him well, whatever he does.
Absolutely. Great comments, JB. I agree with you. I mean, he was a good football player. You know, when a guy transfers in from Oregon State to Alabama, you're like, really, is he going to be able to help? But you're right. He got 5 touchdown passes too. So he was a good receiver, but he did a lot of things, and you know, had a lot to do with those younger receivers maturing, taught them how to work, set a good example. And then we got a similar situation with Gary Dieter coming in here this year from Bowling Green, and I've had some people tell me, "Wow, Alabama's got tons of wide receivers." You can never have enough good football players, and I think you might see a similar impact by Dieter, like we saw by Mullaney. Possible.
Yep, and I would say this too, and definitely shout out to Mullaney, attaboy. But at the same time, Coach Saban and Kiffin, you know, went out. They knew they needed a guy that could kind of solidify, bring some leadership to that wide receiver core. He was available as a grad transfer. You know, they brought him in, so I think they did a fantastic job, and they really do a good job of finding guys. Gary Dieter, you mentioned him. So I think he was really a valuable addition as that graduate transfer.
And it worked out well for Mullaney, too, after, you know, years of winning 6-7 games a year. He got a big ring on his finger, national championship ring. So I'd say that was a pretty good trade-off.
Yeah, it was.
For both sides.
It sure was. And he caught a fair amount of passes. I think his best year at Oregon State was, 52 receptions, something like that. And he
catch around 40 here, yeah.
Around 40.
And 5 touchdowns. And got a chance to play in the National Football League. All right, don't touch that dial. The Alabama softball team is coming off its largest margin of victory all season. Hear from head coach Patrick Murphy after the Tide's 14-run victory over Missouri. And more your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Again, the information's there on your screen on how you can get in touch with us. Tider Insider TV rolling on from a beautiful, beautiful evening in Tuscaloosa. We'll be back after this. A 12-run second inning in the final game of a home series against Mizzou got at Alabama softball to its biggest offensive output in 4 years. The Tide blew out the Tigers 16-2, sealing the series victory in impressive fashion and giving them some momentum because there's no midweek games for the Tide this week, but Alabama will head to Florida for a 3-game series starting Friday, and the Gators are #1 in the country. And Rodney, let's go back to the phone lines, and let's go out to Coker and talk with Howard is with us on the program tonight. Good afternoon, good evening, Howard. How are you?
Good evening. I wanted to ask Rodney, does he not think that they need to sign another running back? Bo Scarber's has always been injury prone, and I don't think he's going to stand up to the I just don't believe he's going to be able to stand up to the action like Derrick Henry and Damian Harris. I don't think can get the job done, and they need to find him a running back.
Right,
I think that's just my opinion.
Okay. Well, they're not going to sign any more for this year. I think this class, unless there's a graduate transfer out there, is a possibility, I guess. But they've got 2 freshmen coming in and got some other guys on the roster. You know, you can't have enough running backs. We understand that, but I think Alabama's got a good core.
Well, I mean, if they could find the right guy, they might do that. It would depend on who it was, certainly. You know, I think they might bring in another player, but it may not be a running back. But anyway, I think, Howard, when you really look at it, I think Bo Scarborough has unlimited potential. I understand what you mean by the 2 knee injuries that he's had. He had one in high school. He had one last spring, required surgery. He's worked really hard. He's 230 pounds right now, and I think he's got all the potential in the world. I think he can be, you know, potentially one of the best running backs Alabama's had. I think Damian Harris, it's really kind of early to evaluate him. He was in games in mop-up role where really the defense could kind of tee off on him. And I do think he had a lot to learn coming from a small school in Kentucky. So I think when you look at it from that perspective, it's a little bit difficult to evaluate him last season because I do think he has a lot of potential. Now, with that said, could they use a 3rd running back? Yes, I think they could. Now, it may be Josh Jacobs, who signed out of Oklahoma, or B.J. Emmons, who I think really fits the mold out of North Carolina, who will be coming in, assuming he's qualified academically. But I really think, Gary, that he's a guy, B.J. Emmons, that at 5'11", 220 pounds, 225 pounds. He's a guy that really kind of fits the mold of the Alabama running backs of the past.
All right, let's take an email. This one comes all the way from Western Massachusetts. Doug wants to know, speaking of running back B.J. Emmons, what he and Raekwon Davis, the big defensive lineman from Reading, Mississippi, the status of their eligibility.
Well, there's nothing official right now, but I do believe that after speaking to B.J. Emmons' coach a while back, that he certainly expected B.J. to get qualified academically. I think he has the test score now. It's just a matter of him having a good spring in the classroom. So I really expect that to happen. As far as Raekwon Davis is concerned, again, nothing official. He's going to have to finish out the school year. I really expect Raekwon Davis, though, to be eligible. So in short, I expect both those guys to be here in June.
All right, that is going to do it for our phone calls and emails. Thanks for the calls. Thanks for the emails. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the Alabama men's swimming team making some history. That's the latest story that we have for you next on TITV. Stick around, everybody. The Alabama men's swimming team brought home their first NCAA relay title in school history in Atlanta on Friday. The 200 medley relay team nearly broke the NCAA record with a time of 1 minute and 22.28 seconds. That time is just 1/100th of a second off the NCAA record. Alabama finished 6th overall at the national championships, its highest team finish since 1983. And Rodney, the spring football time at Alabama is a third of the way through. 15 practices total. They've got 5 in. And coming up Saturday will be the first scrimmage of the spring. What do you think the coaching staff will be looking to get out of that?
Well, again, I think that's a starting spot. You know, you kind of find out which guys, when the coaches really aren't kind of right there telling them what to do, how they respond. I think a lot of young guys, you kind of see how they respond in their opportunities. And you look at the quarterbacks, I think this scrimmage, you know, Gary, may be more possibly more run-oriented. You know, they kind of split those up. Next week, the following week, they have another scrimmage. Maybe that's more pass-oriented. But I think it's going to be really interesting to watch and see how the quarterbacks handle it.
Always big, the first scrimmage of spring practice. Well, that's going to do it for Tider Insider TV. Before we close out, though, you'll notice our dress shirts provided, as always, by the Locker Room in downtown Tuscaloosa, home of the original elephant wear. We encourage you to go by and see Alex and Rush and the courteous staff, or shop online at their website, locker-room.biz. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching TITV. Good night, everybody.